A young black man, a corrupt system, his fight for justice continues. Jeffrey Epstein and P. Diddy are the examples of how law enforcement officers make names for themselves as the cameras are on them every day in press conferences about those they arrest. But what does this do for the innocent? What if there were men innocent of a crime no matter how vile the charge was? In American justice, we are taught that innocent until proven guilty is how our justice system works. But the case of United States versus Kamal G. Dorsey changes that belief. Harassed for months by a woman who was fired from his webcam company for violating company policy, the woman, living in a homeless shelter in Howard County, Maryland, would text Dorsey that she would set him up to be arrested. She sent him over 600 threatening texts Dorsey recorded. In 2017, the Me Too movement was in the minds of everyone. All women are victims and they need no proof, just a story. The woman's story to police was that she was being harassed by Dorsey and he was a pimp. But to investigate pimp cases, police routinely search phones of the victims. Police discovered she was the one harassing Dorsey and no evidence of Dorsey being a pimp. Dorsey, the owner of several cell phone stores, also owned a webcam business that employed over 40 women who performed web content for customers. The woman, hired by the company, had broken a company rule where she gave out her location information to a customer on a live feed and was terminated for her action. She was angry as her $3,000 per week income was gone. She asked Dorsey repeatedly to reinstate her. Dorsey told her that it was a company policy and this was a violation that could not be overlooked for the safety of the company. The woman would not take this ruling lightly. She was a back-page escort before coming to work as a webcam model. She wanted revenge against Dorsey. Dorsey ignored her. Dorsey simply tried to forget that she existed. Enter Kelly James Winchen, a vice detective who arrived to investigate. James Winchen was a part of a new vice section of the Howard County Police Department to combat human trafficking, and they needed cases to arrest. With a dirty history of tampering with evidence, James Winchen would interview the woman and create falsehood after falsehood in every police report to get Dorsey arrested. James Winchen was able to protect herself from prosecution or civil lawsuit because she was deputized as a task force officer, which made her a part-time federal officer. The law is clear: federal officers have immunity from prosecution. Although people sue cops for misconduct, a cop deputized as a federal officer cannot be sued because federal employees are protected from such action. This would be the case against Dorsey in Maryland. James Winchen was caught falsifying her reports against Dorsey, where she reached probable cause to arrest him by writing that she located a prostitution ad on Craigslist Dorsey created. She hid the fact that the ad was a phone store ad for his newly opened cell phone store. After his arrest, the Howard County Police called a press conference and labeled Dorsey a violent pimp, and his case was quickly moved to federal courts, where the indictment could not be dismissed as it would be in the state if wrongdoing by police was discovered. Over the next 5 years in the city jail, Dorsey faced life in prison but refused to fold to the misconduct committed by a dirty detective. He refused all plea offers and wanted to take his case to trial. Prosecutors did everything they could to force Dorsey into a guilty plea. Finally, a biased federal judge, George Russell, was forced to dismiss all evidence against Dorsey after Dorsey exposed the police reports were falsified by Detective James Winchen. Then, Russell did the unthinkable. At a hearing, he instructed the prosecutors on how to bring in the evidence he was forced to throw out against Dorsey. The main evidence prosecutors wanted to use was that they had paid women to testify. These women, now former webcam models, were discovered on text to friends that they were going to be paid and coached by prosecutors to testify against Dorsey, and they had told other women that they too would be paid if they agreed. Dorsey discovered this. The judge, who was a former prosecutor, instructed prosecutors in open court how to exactly win back the evidence he was forced to dismiss over police misconduct. This action violated ethics and Dorsey's due process. The case Dorsey is fighting is a clear demonstration of what is wrong with our federal justice system. From the in-court transcript, Judge Russell instructed U.S. Attorney Ann Dukow created a motion pleading where Dukow fabricated evidence that never existed, and argued that Dorsey and his lawyers were prohibited from seeing to inspect and cross-examine. This action forced Dorchy to accept a guilty plea to conspiracy to commit sex trafficking, as lawyers advised Dorchy that it was the judge who told prosecutors how to get him. Lawyers advised that he had no choice unless he wanted to spend the rest of his life in prison for a crime everyone knows he did not commit. Federal defense lawyers saw this too often and advised Dorchy to save his life, but prosecutors then went a step further to insulate themselves. They wanted a stipulation that prohibited Dorchy from ever investigating his case. They wanted it clear that Dorchy could never have any records of his case or evidence, and he could serve a short sentence and go home. Federal plea agreements are complex, with dozens to hundreds of pages in some cases, with stipulations that protects prosecutors from defendants when they began to question the actions of prosecutors after sentencing. However, when Dorchy was released, the U.S. Attorney overlooked that the Freedom of Information Act allows anyone to obtain records. Dorchy wasn't allowed to obtain any records, so he simply enlisted someone else to obtain the records for him. What was discovered was that the evidence never existed. The motions the federal judge instructed prosecutors to file was filled with fraudulent exhibits that did not exist, ever. Dorchy was tricked to pleading guilty by evidence that did not exist. In 2023, after his release and discovery, Dorchy filed an appeal. He cited his proof. He gave the court full evidence that was restricted from him. It was prosecutor misconduct that was instructed by the judge. The problem he faces, the federal appeal in guilty plea cases under Statute 2255, is a process where the federal judge who presided over the case decides the appeal. Dorchy has to appeal to the very judge who instructed the prosecutor in open court on how to illegally proceed and get him to plead guilty. He has no way to advance his case to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals because he can't get past the judge in his case. Why? Because the very judge that did Dorchy an injustice is the judge who decides his appeal. Statistics show that 90% of 2255 motions filed are denied within 90 days by the judge. But not here. Dorchy provided illicit proof of prosecutor misconduct and a judge's collusion with prosecutors. By federal law, the judge can sit on a 2255 motion for years and never hear the case. To get around acknowledging the wrong that was committed, the judge simply sits on his 2255 motion. It was the federal judge who instructed the prosecutor on how to get Dorchy to plead guilty. 2 years after Dorchy filed, the judge told his court clerks that he will sit on the case forever to protect the court, himself and prosecutors. Today, the U.S. Attorney, with the backing of the federal judge, has now in 2025 instructed the U.S. probation officers to find ways to arrest Dorchy at all costs. To accomplish this, the probation officers have asked the court to allow them to monitor Dorchy's computer use. The court agreed and ordered Dorchy to be monitored at all times for the next 15 years if he uses a computer. The justification? He pled guilty to conspiracy to commit sex trafficking. The U.S. Attorney then discovered that Dorchy goes to law libraries to work on his case. After learning this, they ordered the probation officer to ask the court to restrict Dorchy from the law library because he was working on his case. The federal judge granted the motion ordering that Dorchy could not enter law libraries. Prosecutors paint Dorchy as a monster at every court hearing. They fight to prevent Dorchy from exposing them. It is an uphill battle against a justice system that is undefeated against unknown black citizens. No media outlet cares about a case where a federal judge instructed a prosecutor on record in open court on how to set up an innocent person. No media coverage, no black organizations, and no legal organizations will even return Dorchy's phone calls. They saw what the federal judge had done in this case. They told Dorchy that they did not want to get involved because they feared losing grants. Even the Georgetown Law School students who fight for the innocent told Dorchy that they could lose their grants if they helped him. That is the real America in its justice system. Kamal Dorchy faces a court date of October 22, 2025, where he will fight the federal judge and prosecutors alone who are trying to place more restrictions on him and send him to jail. The judge has refused to hear his appeal and will attempt to place him back in federal prison for filing an appeal. The story continues. October 22nd, Dorchy goes to war for his life.